organizational meeting to adopt the committee rules. And we've all been to committees before, today, this week. The rules remain the same other than the date. So, Representative, could I have a motion, please?
I move to adopt the committee rules dated September 28th, 2023.
Vice Chair McIntyre moves to adopt the committee rules dated September 28th, 2023. Is there any discussion of that motion? I think that calls for a roll call, doesn't it? Okay, if you would just please call the roll.
Representative Bowman?
Aye.
Representative Elmer?
Aye.
Representative Hudson?
Excused.
Representative Manning?
Aye.
Representative Sosa?
Aye.
Representative Wright?
Aye.
Vice Chair McIntyre?
Aye.
Vice Chair Ruiz?
Aye.
Chair Lively?
Aye. Motion carries. We've adopted the rules. So I will close the organizational meeting. I'm going to open an informational meeting, and before we get into that, so colleagues, first I just want to remind you we have a very packed agenda today, and I respect and understand that there's questions and things we won't get to today to do that, but what I encourage you to do is if you have those, let's put them down and then we can follow up later to try to provide that. But I just want to provide a couple of more comments, privilege of the chair to be able to do those things, before we start. So, one, I want to appreciate the invited guests and speakers we have here today for taking the time to be part of this conversation. I know it's not going to be easy necessarily for everybody, but I appreciate you doing it. So the fact that we have this full agenda, we're going to try to process it in a way that works best for all. So what I ask first is, as we have the people come up to testify, let them present the information they're going to present to us, and then have questions, rather than trying to go back and forth and interrupt their presentations would be my goal. I want to remind this committee that this is a policy committee focused on higher education. So that's what the purpose of this committee is. And this discussion is about higher education, but it's an element of higher education that's got a lot of attention recently. But at the end of the day, what we need to be focused on is what, as a state, we do best to provide that higher education for all the students, regardless of their status at the universities and colleges. So I just want to remain that. College athletics has always received a lot of attention and the focus, but represents a very small portion of the students who attend our university system in the state of Oregon. So our first topic today brings strong feelings on all sides, some facts, some speculation, much uncertainty as to what will occur in the future. That's what we're going to try to understand better today. And we need to be open to hearing all sides without trying to judge any actions that have been taken or might be taken. So at the end of the day, I respect every member that's on the committee and those that have chosen to join us up here today, because this is important. And I trust all of you, how you will behave. Now you have to worry a little bit about the chair, but there's some of you here can do that too. But thank you all for being, and let's provide the opportunity. So we'll start with Lisa. I guess you have to introduce yourself for the record. Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair Lively, Vice Chairs McIntyre and Ruiz, and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Lisa Gazelter with the Legislative Policy and Research Office. Representative Lively asked me today to provide some background on the events that have led us to where we are in terms of college sports conferences. Representative Lively asked me today to provide some background on the events that have led us to where we are in terms of college sports conferences.
Oregon. And the athletic director, welcome to both of you. If you'd come to the podium, introduce yourselves for the record, and provide your comments. Enlighten us as much as you can about all of this that's going on. You don't have to go back quite as far as her chart did, but anything you provide would be appreciated.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Chair Lively, Vice Chairs McIntyre and Ruiz, committee members. For the record, my name is Carl Schultz. I'm the president of the University of Oregon. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to engage with you today about collegiate athletics and the decision of the University of Oregon to transition to the Big Ten Conference next year. Our athletic director, Rob Mullins, joins me to provide conference background and address how collegiate conferences are organized and how revenue is distributed to conference universities. For those I've not met, I'm a professor of economics. I spent much of my professional career at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. At Madison, I also served as a department chair, dean, interim chancellor, and provost. And I'm very proud of the fact that, well, at UW-Madison, we significantly improved graduation rates and career readiness as part of our focus on improving the student outcomes and belonging. I'm also honored to have served in 2 presidential administrations, first as a senior staff member of the Council of Economic Advisors, and then as a political appointee in the U.S. Treasury Department. And I also directed the Institute for Research on Poverty at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I bring this experience in politics and public policy and passion for supporting students and helping them succeed to the University of Oregon. I'm very excited and honored to be the president of the University of Oregon and to have today's opportunity with this committee. So thank you very much. So as human beings, we're capable of simultaneously holding more than one emotion. So for reasons I'll explain, I believe the UO's move to the Big Ten is the right thing to do in today's world. At the same time, I am sad that the changing national landscape of intercollegiate athletics has disrupted the Pac-12. I also recognize and value the important role that Oregon State University plays in the great state of Oregon. I and all of us at the University of Oregon want OSU to be successful. The decision to join the Big Ten in August 2024 was not easy. I also understand why there are questions and various emotions and reactions to this upcoming move. Sports provides a point of connection. They bring passion, excitement, and entertainment and build community on campuses across states and our country. As the president of the UO, my job is to maximize the benefit of higher education to all students on our campus. When presented with the value proposition to renew a contract with the Pac-12 or move to a conference providing greater stability, which, among other benefits, allows us to maintain a self-funded athletic program, the choice was both difficult but clear. I want to make a critical point for this committee and for the public to understand. The University of Oregon has a self-funded athletic program. This means that we do not use state general appropriations nor student tuition or fees to fund our athletic program. At the UO, 100% of our student tuition and fees and general state appropriations support our central mission, academics and student support. I believe it is vital for the taxpayers of the state of Oregon and to the families of the students we serve to keep tuition dollars and state appropriations where they should be, with student learning and achievement. We faced a difficult choice. One path would be to extend our media grant of rights to the Pac-12 conference for another 5 years, while a venerable conference with USC, UCLA, and Colorado departing, the conference was not stable nor secure in its organizational future, nor would the media deal that was on the table provide the resources needed to allow UO athletics to be self-funded. The other path was to accept the offer to join the Big Ten, which provides stability and visibility for our program, and so, in turn, our students, and provides the financial resources to support our athletic program. We had only one choice. Some would say this move is an example of money over mission. That is simply not the case. This decision was firmly rooted in ensuring a stable place where our students and student athletes can thrive, where they can continue to have opportunities to learn and discover, where they can have resources to compete at the highest levels, and where the state of Oregon can benefit from increased visibility across the nation through our athletic programs. The UO remains a committed partner in advancing access to public higher education for all Oregonians. We want to see all students in Oregon achieve greatness, graduate high school, and have the opportunity to attend one of the fine institutions in Oregon. So thank you very much for inviting me to present to your committee today, and I look forward to partnering with you to advance opportunities for higher education across the state.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mullins?
Thank you. Chair Lively, Vice Chairs McIntyre and Ruiz, and committee members, for the record, my name is Rob Mullins, Athletic Director at the University of Oregon, where I've been honored to serve for over 13 years. Thank you for having me here today, and thank you, President Schultz, for laying out the values that led to our decision to move to the Big Ten next year. The University of Oregon has been a proud member of the Pac-12 since 1915, and will continue our commitment to this conference and the students who compete throughout this year. For my time with the committee today, I'd like to give a little more context around the dramatic changes that college athletics has been going through for the last several years, and some of the specific events that happened in the Pac-12 that had led us to where we are today. We're in the middle of an evolving landscape in college athletics, and the University of Oregon, we continue to center our values on making sure that student athletes have access to a top education and every opportunity to compete at the highest level with robust support on campus, in the classroom, and a broad range of athletics. The economics of college sports continue to change as regulations regarding how universities can support student athletes are updated. Over the last few years, our governing body, the NCAA, has shifted philosophically from regulating competitive equity to supporting permissive student athlete benefits. This has resulted in positive changes in expanding how universities can support student athletes directly through meals and nutrition, cost of attendance at universities, insurance and medical support, and additional academic cash awards. Legislation such as Oregon Senate Bill 5 in 2021 brought Oregon in line with much of the nation, allowing college athletes to benefit from name, image, and likeness deals. Throughout these changes, the University of Oregon has remained committed to having a sustainable funding model that does not rely on state or tuition support for our athletic program. Our program pays for itself, fully supporting 20 athletic programs serving over 500 student athletes. In addition, the program gives back to the university over $20 million to the general fund at the university. So while challenging, the only way we can maintain this commitment to all students who attend the University of Oregon today and into the future was to not renew our grant of media rights with the Pac-12 and join the Big Ten Conference in 2024. After 13 months of doing all we could to find a path forward with the remaining 10 members of the Pac-12, this decision was made over time with thoughtful deliberation. It is no secret that the stability of the Pac-12 has been in question for some time. Movement across all NCAA conference has been headline news over the last decade, particularly in the previous 2 to 3 years. The instability of the Pac-12 only grew worse in the previous year after failed strategies to create critical media deals and uncertain revenues resulted in the departure of 3 of our Pac-12 conference teams. Those teams took an estimated 40% of the media value for the conference with them. In August, a new media proposal was offered that only compounded issues. When given the opportunity, we accepted the opportunity to join the Big Ten to do what was best for our student athletes and all students at the University of Oregon. The Big Ten Conference offered the stability, exposure, and future resources needed to thrive in this evolving landscape of college sports, and it maximized our capacity to continue to achieve our mission of providing exceptional student-athlete experience both academically and athletically. As I mentioned, we have been proud members of the Pac-12 and have nothing but respect for our colleagues throughout the conference, including our colleagues at Oregon State. Thank you for your time.
Thank you to both of you. So, members, if members have any questions for these two, I would just say, Mr. President, so I've always said the U of O, you say UO, so where did that change? Did I miss something somewhere?
We flexibly use both, so we both are correct.
Thank you. Yes, Representative Bossart Davis.
Thank you, Chair Lively, and thank you for allowing me to sit in today. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for being here. The representative from Albany, so I am concerned about the regional impact. And my first question is, I completely understand being responsive to today's market. Businesses in this state also have to be concerned with today's market and how those market changes and disruptions are happening. So I understand that, but we still have to follow the law. And I'm going to ask you specifically in how public universities are governed. Sub D says act in the best interests of both the university and the state of Oregon as a whole. And so my question to you is, how did you consider impacts to the state specifically, and where can we find those impacts, how you studied them, and who did you report to?
Thank you for the question, Representative Bossart Davis and Chair Lively. So the world of big-time intercollegiate athletics is remarkably unstable. And so we've gone through the chronology of USC, UCLA leaving the conference, Colorado leaving the conference, and it's not necessarily like things would stop there. So for instance, the president of the University of Arizona, Bobby Robbins, about the deal that was on the table said, it'd be akin to selling candy bars to support your Little League team. That doesn't sound like a very stable situation. And so as president of the University of Oregon, I report into the Board of Trustees. And so ultimately this was the Board of Trustees decision advised by my athletic director, Rob Mullins, and myself. In considering the broader impacts of this, I think it would be unfortunate to have two R1 universities in the state of Oregon coming in front of the committee to saying we are in terrible financial distress because a media rights deal wasn't adequate to support our athletic programs. And so both considering these broader impacts and the future of the University of Oregon to maintain this separation between the athletic program and the academic side of the house, we felt it was prudent to do this, and we've followed the appropriate procedures working with our Board of Trustees.
Follow up?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And are those reports available for the public?
I don't know what reports you're referring to.
You said you reported to, or you followed procedure, reported to the Board of Trustees.
Correct.
I'm wondering if we can see those, the impacts.
That was a public meeting
Okay.
with the Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Vice Chair Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, thank you for being here and giving us your presentation. You talked about you bring back to the general fund about $20 million through the athletic department. I'm just wondering if there's any information on where that money goes to. What is the help fund in the University of Oregon?
I don't know how it's spent. I can lay out where the 20 comes from. We raise the funds for and pay full list price for scholarships for 240 scholarships. Roughly on average, 85% of those are non-resident scholarships, and we pay the full list price for those scholarships. So that money's raised and paid back to the institution. In addition, there's an overhead charge to auxiliaries. Athletics pays a portion of that. I think that's in the neighborhood of $4 to $5 million that goes for central services. There's a gift assessment fee. Those are the three largest buckets.
Thank you. You were gonna,
Senator- oh,
sorry,
excuse me.
were you going to say
Yeah.
something, Mr. President?
No, thank you.
Okay. Sorry.
Senator Gelser-Bluin, please.
Thank you, Chair Lively, and thanks for allowing me to be here for a few minutes of this hearing today. And I appreciate the questions from Representative Bossart Davis, and also am interested in those reports. Moving away from the financial pieces, I'm wondering what your expectations are about the impact on the student experience as academics and scholars. Is it expected that students will be able to maintain success in their classes if they are traveling each week during an athletics season across time zones, how will they be supported, and will it increase the length of time it takes for them to obtain a degree, and how will that be paid for, if it will?
Senator, thank you very much for your question, and Chair. As President, a key priority is our students' experience, and that extends to our student athletes. And so one of the things that we have to be very mindful of in this move is how does that affect the student athlete experience? And so there's a top line that people don't understand, that 45% of our student athletes will have no changes in travel. So 45%, so men's and women's cross country, men's and women's indoor outdoor track, acro tumbling do not compete in individual meets with Big Ten institutions, so have no change in their travel. So for the remaining 55%, I turn to my colleagues in the athletic department to say we have to maintain a second to none student athlete academic experience. And Rob, can you share some of what you're doing?
Absolutely. So 10 of our 20 sports do not have any change in regular season travel, as President Schultz mentioned. Should have no impact on time to degree for certain, and we have a robust set of academic support, and this is something that we will continue to work on. So the other thing that we need to find solutions. I'll give you a real example. So we had a fall sport this year do a non-conference series of trips, one to Hawaii, one to Pittsburgh, that were non-conference games. We have a lot more control over those. So we will impact that by staying more regionally when those sports have further travel as part of conference affiliation. And then we'll have a whole set of services that support them when they do have to travel.
And Rob, didn't you do, even with none of this so-called optimization, saying, all right, we're not going to go in non-conference to Hawaii, the largest increase for a sport, I believe it was men's and women's basketball, maybe women's volleyball, would be an additional 6 days. I don't want to, as a scholar, as an academic, I don't want to trivialize 6 days, but that's before any efforts to remove the travel burdens. And so if we're able to schedule longer trips between winter and spring term, that then minimizes the impact on the academic program. And that's what my colleagues in athletics, working in cooperation with the folks who are doing schedules of the Big Ten, are doing.
Okay, we're... Oh. One more, then
One
we'll
more?
need to move on, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. And thank you both again for being here. During my time here, I've sat on the Carbon Committee, I've sat on Climate Committee, I've sat on Agriculture Committee, Business Committee, and here in the state of Oregon, we study the environmental impacts on everything. I had a call from a local rancher who was pretty upset, and he said they study my cows' farts. So my question to you is, did you study the environmental impacts on travel, on the trucks that are carrying the gears, on the travel of the all of your student athletes, and what are those environmental impacts going to be?
Again, similar for us, similar on the time. Our goal is to keep the travel change as minimal as possible. So we're going to look at things like, change to non-conference travel, which I've mentioned, and we're working with our other colleagues in the Big Ten as well as the conference staff to, are there ways to do neutral site league competitions, and there are opportunities to minimize travel.
I mean, I think the conference will be interested in Oregon competing more frequently with USC, UCLA, Washington, for instance, as part of those efforts. But that's yet to be locked down.
So just to confirm, it has not been studied yet?
I would say the travel and the impact on student athletes is being looked at kind of daily.
Thank you.
So if there's, especially once we hear the second part of this discussion, if there's questions in that, again, unfortunately, we have a very important conversation after this about opportunity grants and supporting our students in higher education. So I don't want to cut that short. But so, write them down, and then we will work collectively after that to be able to get back to them with questions that apply to UO. I have a hard time with that, UO.
The UO.
Or questions that might apply to OSU when they've completed their presentation, because unfortunately, we just have limited time. So thank you. Thank you again, both of you. for being, and I'm sure we'll have other questions that we'll be asking you, but I appreciate the presentation and the clarification you've provided to this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, let's see, we have the president and the athletic director from Oregon State. I assume you're going to come up together, and then we can have the other two. Welcome. I got to meet the new president the day before she started, I believe, when I was in Oregon State. She was on campus, but she hadn't really started yet, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Chair Lively, members of the committee, for the record, I am Jayati Murthy, President of Oregon State University. Thank you for the opportunity to give an update on the impacts of conference realignment on Oregon State University, our student athletes, and our community. OSU student athletes have worked hard to earn their place in one of the highest ranked programs in the country. I have heard from thousands of Oregonians across the state about how angry and sad they are about the destruction of a 108-year conference to which generations of Oregonians are deeply connected and of which both U of O and OSU are charter members. The decision to pull out of the Pac-12 by the University of Oregon and the University of Washington, two state institutions, was made very quickly with little regard for the fallout to sister institutions and to taxpayers, and with little time to address alternatives. The consequences for OSU are devastating. There are significant impacts on athletic budgets, on student-athlete scholarships, and to the Corvallis community. There are severe impacts to non-revenue sports, Olympic sports, and to women athletes. We're working tirelessly to secure our path forward following these guiding principles that emphasize the holistic development and the well-being of all students, the ability of OSU student athletes to compete at the highest levels possible, the best experience for alumni.
opener at San Jose State. Another 1.5 million watched our game versus Washington State last weekend. Reser Stadium is a major asset for us and will generate enough revenue annually to cover the debt service as well as provide additional income to support all teams in our athletic department. I am so proud of the completing Reser Stadium project and its transformation into a nation's best-in-class football facility with year-round programs and facilities for OSU students generally, faculty and staff. Both a new student welcome center and health center are located in the stadium complex. Even with all that, the momentum occurring at OSU right now, we can't sugarcoat the financial realities we must address. We must be transparent about the reality of the financial impact while recognizing that we are in a situation no one has ever experienced. What we are presenting today are estimates based on the best information we have available, with a comparison between the media and overall revenue streams of a Power 5 conference like the Pac-12 and the Group of 5 conference. OSU Athletics has budget revenues for the current fiscal year of nearly $95 million. As you can see on the chart here on the screen, we are predicting an over $40 million drop in annual revenues in 1 year. The bulk of the impact is from dramatic reductions in media revenues and NCAA and other conference proceeds. We're also preparing for some drops in ticket sales revenues. While these are estimates, we must plan around the low end given the circumstances today. But be assured, our team is committed to pursuing every opportunity. It'll take time for us to build something, and we owe it to our student athletes, Beaver Nation, and the state of Oregon to do so. We will do our part to seek all other possible sources of revenue, and what we need from the legislators is support for student athletes. Moving forward, my top financial priority is preserving our scholarship commitment to our student athletes. Currently, OSU has a $10.4 million annual commitment towards athletic scholarships, which traditionally have been covered by our conference distributions, of which one component is media revenues. The current lottery allocations of $650,000 no longer meet our needs. We have a moral obligation to continue supporting our student athletes. Their experience right now, they are experiencing the real implications of conference realignment. For many, without these scholarships, college would not be financially possible. The other financial implication of conference realignment on OSU is a repayment of the athletic department COVID debt. COVID health protection regulations placed financial burdens on university athletic departments throughout the region. OSU faced over a year of no fans in the stands and therefore zero ticket sales. To bridge the impact, Oregon State loaned its athletic department $31.8 million to cover the COVID-related deficit. The opportunity for athletics repayment have changed due to the conference realignment. If left unpaid, this debt will ultimately be paid by OSU students through E&G funds, which consist of tuition and state funding allocations. Thank you.
You will now hear from one of our students, Evan Park, a student athlete. She's a student athlete, and also a Corvallis business owner, Christina Reklau.
Very good. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Lively, Vice Chairs McIntyre and Ruiz, representatives on the Committee of Higher Education. For the record, my name is Evan Park. I am a student athlete on the Oregon State University women's rowing team, planning on graduating this spring with a degree in chemistry and an option in environmental science. Born and raised in Bend, Oregon, I walked onto the rowing team 3 years ago with no prior experience, and now I'm an internationally competitive athlete in my sport, having earned a spot on the national team's under-23 women's Cox 8, that took gold at the World Championships in Bulgaria this summer. My journey from novice to world champion would not have been possible without the resources and community at OSU. When I applied to enroll at Oregon State, however, I did not envision a future as a student athlete as part of my college experience. I came here for the unwavering culture, strong science programs, and authentic people. Now I'm entering what could be my final year at Oregon State, depending on my decision to row another season here, forego my fourth year of athletic eligibility, or possibly pursue another university. Playing into this decision is undoubtedly the consideration of the conference realignments. As a student athlete leadership team executive on Oregon State's Student Athlete Advisory Committee, I am at the center of student athlete, coach, administrator, alumni, and fan conversations about future conference membership and how the ramifications of these decisions will affect the former best college town in the Pac-12. What will happen to non-revenue sports like rowing? Will all athletic teams lose significant funding? How will the city of Corvallis thrive without the revenue from in-conference games? Distant higher-ups are making these critical decisions about our futures with little regard to their effects on student athletes. Throughout my time here, I have gained so much more from rowing than I ever could have imagined. Although I started as a walk-on, I earned a full scholarship in my second year, saving myself tens of thousands of dollars in student loans. I've also made lifelong bonds with teammates and coaches, forged from the grueling work we put in and day out. Overall, my experience as an OSU student athlete has helped me develop invaluable skills that I will carry into my future. Time management skills through balancing schoolwork with practice, teamwork to move together through the water, accountability because a boat of 8 rowers can't go out if only 7 are on time, and discipline to push me out of bed at 5:30 in the morning to get faster when I know that other college students are sleeping soundly. As new conference affiliations may require further travel and more time away from campus, I foresee a future with more stress and mental health issues. While every student athlete is unique, each coming from different places, bringing unique strengths, and having varied schedules, we are all united in our feelings of being left out of the conference realignment conversation. It is extremely demoralizing to stand by as media companies dictate our futures and the playing field. I strongly maintain that all student athlete experiences and needs should be brought into the equation when these decisions are made. For now, our only approach is to control what we can, how we train, fuel our bodies, attend to our academics, and compete on the course, field, or court. I look ahead to the spring season and try my best to keep my teammates focused on the most important challenge, working hard every day to be faster and more competitive on the national stage. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Congratulations to you and your teammate to your
Thank you.
success. I have a hard time dealing with my kayak. I can't imagine training in that you go through. But congratulations. Thank you. Please introduce yourself.
Hello. Thank you so much for your time today, Chamber, our Chair Lively, and the members of the committee. My name is Christina Rekla, and I am the Executive Director of Visit Corvallis. Visit Corvallis is the nonprofit that is responsible for promoting all of those special events, attractions, and experiences that make Corvallis and Benton County special. Not only to visiting out-of-state guests, but also to our fellow Oregonians and our local residents. Visit Corvallis's mission is to enhance Corvallis's prosperity by elevating its visitor experience. One of the ways that we accomplish this goal is by enticing and promoting our local restaurants, lodging, retailers, and other experiences to thousands of incoming sports fans every year. Not only do we do that, but also this realignment puts us in jeopardy with our ability to accomplish our mission. The local lodging taxes represent over 95% of Visit Corvallis's annual budget. As you can imagine, being the home of OSU and having that on our welcome sign as you come over the Van Buren Bridge certainly has us concerned. This realignment will make it harder for us to support our community and local businesses which provide jobs year-round to residents, of which 40% of our residents are OSU students. Visit Corvallis not only supports our community and businesses in a variety of ways, connecting with students, but we also run other programs year-round, such as our Mid-Willamette Valley Food Trail, of which we partner with our community across the river, Albany Visitors Association, as we co-lead this, as this program helps support 55 small restaurants, farms, farmer markets by giving them promotional materials and promotion that they would not be able to afford on their own. I bring that up to just reiterate that this is not only about the universities, but the communities around them. Visit Corvallis also provides professional photography to some of these smaller businesses that cannot afford it. We also provide marketing materials and video and photography to our city of Corvallis, Benton County government, and marketing materials when they are in the process of trying to recruit new talent to our communities. So this will also have an impact on that. We'd like to underscore the importance of OSU athletics to our community. I'd like to read a quote from a local business owner who could not make it today. This quote is from Tesh Pedicrio, the owner of For Chicken and Waffles, a new downtown restaurant who actually has opened within the last year, and one of their major markets is the sports fan. As a local restaurant owner, OSU athletic attendance plays a vital role in sales because it brings in a steady stream of customers, boosting revenue and supporting the local economy. These events attract fans who often dine out before and after games, creating a consistent flow of business that many restaurants and small businesses rely on to thrive. OSU athletics is the backbone of much of our sales, and without the attendees coming to purchase, our small town businesses will struggle. Given that we also are talking about restaurants, I also want to bring up the importance. There's been a lot of focus on football, but if you own a restaurant, some of the toughest months that you will have are January and February. So I want to reiterate there's also the importance of events like basketball, gymnastics that happen during the winter time. I know looking at our lodging data, that also is a hard time for our lodging properties as well. So it fills in a lot of gaps. Finally, I just wanted to follow up with Visit Corvallis is partnering with OSU to calculate the economic impact that athletics has on our community. So we are in the process of doing that calculation with the data that we have for past games, but then we also are doing a survey for those who have attended recent events and moving forward so that we will have that most current data for the current schedule. In conclusion, I would say that the realignment has had far-reaching impacts beyond the university and even beyond Corvallis, and to the well-being of Mid-Willamette Valley communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank to both of you for doing that. So I'd like, Mr. Barnes can return and then have you, President, and that if there's questions that the members have of either of them, this would be your opportunity to ask those questions of their presentations, and then we can see where we're in. We also do have the opportunity for Brad Humphreys and to kind of, from an economic standpoint, to wrap this up. But yes, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you for your
Were
presentation.
you first in line?
I was first in line.
I'll defer to the Vice Chair. He
Okay, no, I saw you, so sorry, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr.
Go
Chair,
ahead.
and Mr. Vice Chair.
You're welcome.
And thank you for presenting. And I don't expect an answer to this question today necessarily, but curious if you have thoughts. I think there's two policy questions we have to answer. The first is about how do we deal with the fallout from this decision. And I've heard from both institutions about their thoughts on how we navigate the financial implications here. But the question I'm curious about is, what role do you believe the state has in regulating these kinds of decisions moving forward, particularly when the implications for the state could be to the tune of tens of millions of dollars? And perhaps the view is from one institution that a local governing board can authorize that, and that's the role of the state. But perhaps there's a greater role, not necessarily for the legislature, but for the executive branch, perhaps to the representative's point, evaluate the impact on the state and have a more state-centered approach moving forward. I'm just curious if you have thoughts on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that question, and it's a really important one because I think this round of events has shown that there are holes in the way we're doing this whole thing. Literally tens of millions of dollars impact on our institution and on the local community. There could be different ways, and we have to think through these. There could be, for example, when you anticipate a decision that could impact a sister institution such as ours, the first order of business ought to be that we ought to be consulted. I mean, there has to be consultation and a gathering of data, and no decisions ought to be made overnight. If we cannot come to a consensus about the path forward, that there may be a role for the governor, for example, to step in and express an opinion. But what cannot happen is decisions made literally overnight. I mean, so August 3rd, we're still talking about Pac-12 going forward with a media deal, and by 7 a.m. on August 4th, the whole thing's gone, and we are left with $40 million a year in the red. All right, this can't happen overnight. There should have been a path for a conversation between the two universities, a discussion about potential paths forward, and if a consensus couldn't be reached, then the governor steps in. But there has to be time taken to make a decision this big. It can't happen in hours.
Thank you. And Vice Chair, I apologize to you because Representative Conrad did have his name up. I did see it, but then I got distracted. So
It's okay.
Okay, Representative Conrad.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you, President. You actually just answered my question, which was simply going to be, can you please talk about the conversations that you had before the decision was made? And you just addressed that. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Vice Chair, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Lively. I have a couple questions. Number one is I'm reading through the stuff. So there was an Apple TV deal that came forward, kind of fell through the cracks, but was there a deal before the Apple TV deal from another source or media source that was presented to the Pac-12 teams?
Okay, so you probably read there's been discussion about things. So here's the story, right? So if I came in just about that time as president, so I know a little bit about it. Maybe I'll hand it off to you, Scott.
Sure. The deal that would have been presented prior to that was simply a renewal of the current deal. Was always an option. It had been prior to Apple's presentation.
And that was with?
Well, ESPN, Fox were involved, and so a renewal at a certain percentage rate could have been attained.
So, follow up, Mr. Chair. So the ESPN deal roughly would have been $30 million per school. There was a counteroffer from the Pac-12 commissioner for $50 million.
It's not clear that there was a counter offer. I mean, it's been repeated in the press. I'm not aware of it. I don't know that this was ever put in front of ESPN. It's not clear that it was. I don't know that it was.
One other follow-up. It seems that ESPN, I mean, according to articles, who knows, right? But it seems that, according to reports, a $50 million counteroffer was offered. Pac-12 commissioner went back and asked for $50 million. ESPN said no. That was that. So I'm there's multiple articles, but I mean, I wish we had the Pac-12 commissioner here to answer these questions. But it seems that there's a lot of gray area around there that I guess we still have questions about.
Let me add this, all right? So there were 10 voting members in the Pac-12 at the time when these decisions and conversations were happening. And you should be absolutely sure that all 10 didn't necessarily align with 50 million. I will tell you that neither OSU nor WSU ever supported a $50 million number. We know that that's not the valuation. So you shouldn't assume when people talk about Pac-12 presidents that that's a uniform group. It is not. OSU and WSU are keenly aware of our media markets. I know that Corvallis has a population of 60,000 people, and I know what its media valuation is. So please don't assume that we were all voting the same way or even had the same opinion.
And one more question. Okay, Mr. Chair. Has OSU landed in a new conference, or what is like the update to this day? Like what?
Yeah, we have not. We are continue to explore multiple options and framework or structure on how that would work. So as of today, we are not in a conference for next year. Obviously, just for the record, we will continue to play in the Pac-12 until the end of this academic year.
Sorry, one more question.
I thought you said only one more.
It was one A, one B, one C.
Okay.
Yeah. You all know about this week's the test you all provide to us. Five question test being 50. Was the Big 12 or Big 10, Big whatever? Was that an offer? Did they offer University of Oregon and Washington to join? Or I'm just wondering why Oregon State did not get an invitation from the big conference.
Yeah, there's Power 5 conferences, including the Pac-12, and our pursuit for a discussion was there. Two things typically come back as it relates to feedback as to why not. Small market and eyeballs on televisions. Now, if you would listen to my comments earlier about 3.2 million watching our game at San Jose State. It's a great rating, but that feedback, small market size, and then number of eyeballs consistently over on TV. So I'm not suggesting I agree with all that. I'm suggesting that's some of the feedback.
Thank you.
Senator, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome. It's great to have you both here, and I apologize that I failed to wear orange today. My heart is in orange, obviously. Thank you for speaking directly to the path forward. I think the points that you raise about the holes in our in the governance system are very valid, and I had flashbacks over the last several weeks of many discussions with President Ray and his concerns about independent boards and how that would impact students, particularly Oregon students, and Oregon State's role as providing access for all Oregon students. So it's troubling to see this come to fruition. What can we as the legislature do to support Oregon State and specifically those student athletes whose scholarships are on the line? Is there assistance that you need from us to ensure that those students are able to complete their degrees? Is there a role for the University of Oregon to step up and fill some of that hole? And I would ask President Schultz, but it looks like he left.
Yeah, so Scott laid out some of the potential remedies that we're looking for. That's what,
10.4 million in annual scholarship costs would be one ongoing need.
Yeah, and then there is a one-time debt due to COVID that the athletic department has incurred, and that's, again, we ask you to consider that. So that's one thing. Now, should the University of Oregon pay for this. I mean, that's for you guys to decide, but I will, of course, point out, and as you yourself have done, that in fact the University of California system had determined that there should be reimbursement by UCLA for Cal's costs in the range of 2 to 10 million. They haven't decided on a particular number that has been announced publicly yet, though they did have a meeting of the border regions on September 21st. So there are precedents, but again, I mean, it's not something that my focus isn't really is not really on punishing U of O or any of that. That's not where my brain is. My central focus is on our students and making sure that they can succeed in this situation.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, my goal isn't punishing the University of Oregon either. It's just looking at where are the resources, recognizing that these are state institutions and the institutions come in front of us equally to ask for state support, and we are talking about students that we have made a commitment to. Has the University of Oregon reached out to you, Madam President, about paths forward and the impact on the institution and the students in particular?
Not explicitly, no. I'm sure they're sympathetic to our situation, but I've not had a reach out from them.
Thank you.
So Representative Mannix, and then I would just unfortunately tell committee members we're rapidly running out of time. We do have an opportunity here from Brad Humphreys, the sports economist, that might help us understand the bigger picture in that too. But so I'll go to Representative Mannix, then I think Representative Eller. Representative McIntyre, and then Representative Bossett Davis, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you. Thanks for taking care of that. Representative Mannix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first disclaimer is I'm a University of Virginia College and Law School Cavalier, so I do not have an alumni connection in this discussion. But I do have an Oregon connection in the sense that we're here as representatives of the state of Oregon, looking to the best interests of the state, which includes trying to determine the best interests of our institutions. And there's a difference perhaps between ownership, governorship, and directorship. The institutions involved here are owned by the state of Oregon. They're established under our statutory scheme. And the way we've set it up is we've allowed the directorship of these institutions to lie with their board of directors. And in this case, we have boards of directors who may have disparate perspectives about where to go forward. We're challenged with a seismic shift in the circumstances involved in sports competition, which then has a tremendous impact on the finances of both institutions. But in this case, a negative impact on the Oregon State finances. I say this because it seems to me this brings us around to the notion of an emergency confronting the state of Oregon, because one of our institutions is financially challenged. And I am not quite wanting to see us being in positions of imposing penalties on one institution versus another, but seeing what we as the state government ought to be doing to remedy the situation. Now, when we created Oregon Health Sciences University, and yes, in my prior life I was here for that, left and came back, we created a public corporation, and we were very careful about the governance of the institution, because they were being given the opportunity to receive grants and funding in terms of the health sciences, but also they were given the responsibility to be stewards for the state of Oregon. Oregon State University is unique here because you are a land grant university. And one of the things we need to explore is how do we take advantage of that special status to do some things, and I'm simply trying to plant some seeds here, Mr. Chairman, to going forward to make sure that we remedy the circumstances you've been placed in. I'm not sure, and we'll let the courts and the lawyers argue about the Pac-12 and all of its governance and those issues. We're not in a position to resolve that, but I think we're challenged to be listening to you about how we resolve the implications and the effect on your institution. And I know I'm giving more of a speech here, Mr. Chairman, but I think it's important to note that we have people of goodwill on both sides. I am disappointed that there wasn't a consideration of let's say, lots of discussions brought to you by the University of Oregon. I think there's a fault there, and I'll say that. At the same time, things are moving forward, and whether or not we can stop those things from moving forward, we have an obligation, in my view, Mr. Chairman, to make sure that Oregon State University is made whole and protected in this shift, and given the opportunity. We have a crisis, and do we result in chaos, or do we see this as an opportunity? I'm simply trying to open the door to a discussion as to how we move forward, because we may be unhappy about how we got here today. And yes, we're being driven by media and money considerations, which on the one hand offend me, on the other hand, it's a reality that we face in today's sports world. So I invite you to think about, and perhaps not answer today, some positive steps we ought to be doing as a state institution to bolster you financially in the short run, treating this as an emergency which you did not cause. At the same time, transition to what do we do with that land grant status? You know, that started out with land that we got that we're able to use to establish this university. Do we have a new phase here of a new land grant opportunity to talk to our friends in the federal government? I'd like to just leave that as a closing comment. I do think we need to be engaged positively to solve this dilemma. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I don't know if you got to the question, but I appreciate your
No,
comment.
that's why I admitted it's a philosophical question.
No, in that vein, may I add something? All right, it is true that there are enormous winds of change buffeting college athletics, but I would submit that we have agency. All right, we have free will, we have determinism. We can choose to withstand some of this buffeting, or we can simply choose to simply go with it and let somebody else pick up the losses, which is really what happened here. We could have decided, it's not true that the Pac-12 was falling apart and it was so unstable that you had to head for the exits. The Pac-12 falls apart if you leave. You may choose not to leave and therefore hold the conference together, all right? The Apple deal wasn't some horrendous deal. It was actually a pretty intriguing one, and there was no obvious reason to leave it for half a share of the Big Ten proceeds. So these are not there is nobody up there determining that we ought to leave the conference or the conference fall apart. We have the choice not to do so.
So I'll remind people, this particular committee is a policy committee on higher education. This is a very important conversation, how we proceed from here point forward. I will rely on the committee members to help chart that. That may not end up in our purview, but I appreciated this conversation, but help us guide then our other colleagues in that, how we might help with the situation. So Representative McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to jump on to Rep. Ruiz's questions really fast and see if I can get a little bit more clarification. If everybody would, and you guys may not know this answer for the University of Oregon, but I'm curious on your end, if everybody would have stayed in the Pac-12 with maybe the ESPN renewal or with the Apple deal, what would have been the revenue loss? For U of O in their paperwork, they're saying it's $5 million per school reduction with the Apple. So they were looking at a loss of $5 million, which, looking at your losses and their revenue increases, that's not a lot of money. I can't believe I'm saying that, right? $5 million. But what would have been your loss if everything would have stayed together?
I don't know that there was a loss, all right? The Apple deal was an interesting deal, to say the least. The first year would have been a baseline of $23 million, and if we brought in enough subscribers, we may have very well exceeded what we were making in the previous ESPN deal. In the second year, if we didn't hit $30 million, we had the option to simply step away from the deal altogether, and beyond that, every year, the money we would have made would depend on the number of subscribers we brought in over the $30 million. So we could very well have ended up with a great deal more money than U of O is even making with their Big Ten deal for the next 5 years. So it was an unusual deal, very different from the kinds of deals that we were getting before. but there were many of us who were quite intrigued by the upside potential of that deal and the inevitability of streaming coming to sports. I mean, that's happening, one way or the other. So it's not given that it was some kind of a horrible deal.
It was, the delta was 26, a little over 26 in the current deal, 23 guaranteed by Apple first year with projections that actually got the entire conference membership very excited about year 2 and 3. And that's why it was such a surprise at the end. There was an opportunity to close a gap on the Big Ten and SEC over time if this worked. And to President Murthy's point, if it didn't, we could take a course correction.
So we've run out of time, but I would provide you
Just
a
a
last
quick question.
opportunity. Representative Bossart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's just a discrepancy in the timeline, and since President Schultz and Director Mullins aren't here anymore, but when you're talking about a timeline, you're saying a few days and how that all unwinded, and we watched it in the news, so we're very familiar with it. When he was up here testifying, he mentioned months. And so can you speak to the discrepancy in the timeline? They said they had months of talking, and then you're talking about days. What is the discrepancy there?
Okay, so the discrepancy is this, right? So UCLA and USC left in, I think, end of June of 2022. And at that time, there was a great deal of talk about potentially U of O and UW leaving. So it was certainly in the air. Now, of course, they hung around for a year after that without leaving. And President Schultz would be the best spokesman for this. But our assumption was that they didn't actually get a deal from the Big Ten, which is why they didn't leave, because I don't understand why they would stay if they had an offer, right? So the assumption was that they didn't get a full share, and that's the reason they stayed. Now, what changed at the end of July, I will tell you that July 31st, August 1st, August 2nd, there was no indication that they were leaving. And at the end of the day, actually ended up leaving for a partial share for the next 5 years. All right. So yeah, so he's right in the sense that it was in the air, floating around, but there was nothing definite, and there was presumably no offer on the table. But he can clarify that. But the decision to leave was precipitated by an offer from the Big Ten at the very end of. Perhaps the end of July, early August is really when that actually happened.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you all. I appreciate and understand that not everybody agrees with where we've ended up here and what the facts are or not. That's what part of this conversation is about. I encourage you again, if there's other questions in that we can provide either the University of UO or Oregon State, that we will do that in the meantime to try to get that, and then we'll collectively have to talk about what role, if any, this committee or what we might recommend to others within the legislature that starts to address this. There was no pretense that we're going to undo anything at this particular point, but we appreciate what this has created for one of our large educational institutions and the impact it potentially has in the long term for all of higher education in the state of Oregon. So I appreciate your patience understanding that. So thank you for your time. And so I'm going to try now to spend a little time. Is he still on the line? Okay. Thanks again for attending. Mr. Humphreys, Dr. Humphreys, here he is. I apologize for the delay in being able to get you in, but if you can provide some overview quickly for us, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. I really appreciate this opportunity to provide this testimony and provide some perspective on what's going on here. Could I have my first slide, please? So the big picture, what I'm going to talk about here over the next 10 minutes, to answer the question, how have we gotten to the point? How have we gotten to the point where the Pac-12 conference is now the Pac-2 conference in a matter of weeks? So the big picture here is the main driving reason is a 1984 Supreme Court of the United States decision on college football television broadcast rights that's typically called the Board of Regents decision. That's where this started. And the next important thing to emphasize is the entire driving force behind all of this is college football broadcast rights money in the Power Five conferences, and in fact, in the top tier of schools in those Power Five conferences. It's also important to recognize that the conference commissioners of these Power Five conferences have a fiduciary responsibility to the conference members as a whole, and that fiduciary responsibility does really not align with the mission of public universities. It doesn't align with the interest of college athletes, or it doesn't align with the interest of college football fans. But that's what's driving all of these changes. From another larger perspective, it's important to recognize that big-time college sports is a commercial activity, and it's a commercial activity that lies outside of the traditional educational mission of colleges and universities, especially land-grant universities. And the implication there is that big-time college sports is interstate commerce, and at some level, this will require some federal regulation because it's involving interstate commerce. And I have my next slide, please. So, a little bit of history of college football broadcast. The first college football broadcast was before World War II in 1939. And then as we entered the post-World War II era, the 50s to the 1970s, it was the NCAA which was negotiating these football broadcast rights contracts, and they heavily regulated which teams could appear on television. In fact, they had a rule that said that teams could only appear on television 6 times over a 2-year period. So in 1981, the Board of Regents of the University of Oklahoma and the University of Georgia sued the NCAA for restraint of trade, an antitrust violation under the Sherman Act, because they said, look, you're negotiating these broadcast rights contracts, and we could do much better if you weren't allowed to do that, and we could do it, or somebody else could do it. In 1984, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs and said that indeed the NCAA could no longer negotiate these broadcast rights. Coincidentally, that was the same year when ABC purchased ESPN, and we saw a huge expansion of ESPN's purchase of college football broadcast rights and televising games. So the key point here is, in the post-Board of Regents atmosphere, the ability to negotiate these broadcast rights for football only devolved onto athletic conferences and, in some cases, Notre Dame, individual schools. So they're the ones that now are negotiating these football broadcast rights contracts. All of this realignment, and this realignment has been going on for more than a decade, again, is driven entirely by the incentives for conferences to increase those football broadcast rights fees through expansion. Next slide, please. So just to point out, this is a lot of money, what we're talking about here, these broadcast rights fees. So this is the annual football broadcast rights fees for just the Power Five conferences plus Notre Dame in millions of dollars. So it was pretty trivial in the 1990s. It starts to take off a little bit in about 1995, which coincidentally is when Penn State moved to the Big Ten, the first major realignment move. But beginning in about 2009, it really takes off, and now we're talking about, those are billions of dollars there, right? That 1,700, that's $1.7 billion per year in broadcast rights fees just for these 5 conferences in Notre Dame. My next slide, please. Okay, it's also important to think about the relationship between big-time sports and public universities. Now, of course, we all know the mission of universities is to educate, but it's also important to recognize that many universities operate commercial activities. Hospitals, schools with hospitality programs operate hotels, ag schools operate dairies, sometimes restaurants are operated by universities, and these are commercial activities. Right, but NCAA athletic departments derive a much, much larger share of their revenues from these commercial activities than other parts of the university. So where do all these huge commercial activity-driven revenues go? Well, the other thing that economic research shows is that Division I athletic departments are engaged in an arms race, and that arms race drives, with their rival teams, drives huge increases in spending on coaches and athletic facilities to attract prime players and to be successful. Right. So for that reason, these revenues from the commercial activities tend to stay within the athletic department. I think it's also important to recognize when we're thinking about the role of intercollegiate athletics, big time intercollegiate athletics, because I'm an economist and I have to talk about the costs. There's also a lot of research that shows that big time college sports generate some negative student outcomes. Big time college sports are associated with increases in crime on campus. Big time college sports have been shown to be associated with or cause negative student outcomes in terms of lower grades and longer completion times to undergraduate degrees. So I know we're thinking about the benefits of intercollegiate athletics here, but it's important to recognize that there are some costs and that some powerhouse colleges and universities have decided to eliminate intercollegiate athletics. For example, the University of Chicago was a founding member of the Big Ten Conference, and they eliminated all their intercollegiate athletic programs in the 1930s. I have provided you with a copy of this 2009 Congressional Budget Office report that clearly shows that the Congress, the CBO, believed that Division I sports represented commercial activity, and they concluded that they could be taxed as unrelated business income. But they also concluded that it wouldn't make any sense to collect that tax because universities could easily change their accounting practices to avoid it. My next slide, please. So this is all being driven, all of this realignment is being driven by college athletic conferences. It's important to recognize that conferences perform some really important economic functions. I mean, they set the schedules, they conduct championships, they provide and regulate officials, those sort of things. Those have economic value, and it's important to have conferences. But again, their primary role in realignment is that these conferences are the ones that negotiate these football-only broadcast rights deals with networks and streaming services. So that means that conference commissioners have consistently tried to increase the number of teams in their conferences and increase it by adding schools in large media markets to increase the value of those contracts. As my graph showed, they've been tremendously successful at it, right? Now, football broadcast rights fees depend on the number of conference game viewers, so adding schools in large media markets is the primary driver of these increases in revenues, right? So these conference commissioners, the commissioner of the Big Ten, the commissioner of the ACC, they have vastly different incentives than do college football fans, universities who have big-time athletic programs, or college athletes. And it's also important to remember that the NCAA can't get involved in any of this football broadcast rights market because the Supreme Court has said they cannot. But it's also important to recognize that the NCAA has also declined to engage in any sort of regulation to protect the interests of either college football fans or college athletes. Last slide, please. So some concluding thoughts. Big-time college sports are a commercial activity, and we need to recognize that. And it does fall out of the traditional mission of universities. And I think that should give us some pause to think about the role that big-time college sports plays in colleges. I want to read a quote from the CBO report. Because public universities operate under the auspices of state governments, laws regarding state commercial enterprises may also be relevant to the commercialization of their activities. I think that has some profound implications for some policy remedies to this problem. It's also important to recognize that public universities get special tax treatment, right, because they serve the public interest. And we should really, again, pause and think about how the operation of commercial activities in terms of big-time college sports by these public universities really serves the public interest. I think that's an important question that I think this committee should probably debate. So what about the impact on the academic side of universities of these conference changes? There's evidence that shows that these conference changes by schools have no impact on the academic outcomes of those schools. So I don't think anybody that changes conference should be concerned that the academic side of their operation is going to be hurt. I'll finally just mention something that's already been brought up in the testimony. That is this Berkeley tax, which was discussed in a meeting last week. So the University of California Board of Regents decided decided that they would allow UCLA to move to the Big Ten, but as part of that deal, they required mitigation measures involving travel and other issues regarding student athlete welfare. That is, they're going to have to make sure that the athletes are not adversely affected by this new substantial travel. And they also have authorized payments of up to $10 million per year from UCLA to Cal to mitigate some of the losses that Cal's going to experience. That's the end of my testimony, and I'd be happy to take questions now.
Thank you very much. That was very informative and adds to our adds to our conversations about what's going on here and what the impacts of that was very helpful. And I'm sure there may be some questions. We've just run out of time for this one, but I know we have your contact information and we'll read through some of the other data you provided. But that was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer questions through email or on a private Zoom call or any way that you'd like to do that.
Perfect. This is very helpful. Thank you. So colleagues, we are out of time. I appreciate all the conversations and what we've learned here. Obviously, there's a lot going on here. And so it's our role ultimately then to take all that in and see if we can help accommodate, address, but there's multiple things here besides college athletics, and I think that's what we talked about. This is a higher education committee, so things do overlap. So we'll have more opportunities. What I encourage you to do, as I did before, if you have further questions on that, let's get those to Lisa so we can kind of round that. And then if you have some other suggestions, especially based on the last presentation we had from the economist, sports economist, I think it'd be good to get that on the list so we can start building the list of what we may have further conversations about or what we do. So thank you all for attending. Again, I apologize for the running over the time, but that's, you know, the chairs, that's what they do. They just don't follow the schedule very well. I'm going to close that informational. And I don't know, have we, the new president, PSU, is she here? So one of the conflicts that came up, we have the Higher Education Committee in, oh, thank you. We have the Higher Education Committee in the Senate, which is the Education Committee and Higher Education, and the one in the House meets at the same time. And so we've been trying to accommodate that. We tried to eliminate that, we didn't get to eliminate it. So when President Schultz left in that, they were going over to that particular committee to make an appearance. We have, thankfully, the new president online here, and I don't know, we've already messed her schedule up. Yeah. So thank you again. So I'll open an informational to have an introduction from the new president of Portland State. And welcome, and apologize again for the delay.
Thank you, no problem. That was certainly an interesting session. Yes. Well, Chair Lively and members of the House Higher Education Committee, for the record, my name is Ann Cudd, and I'm honored to be here in front of you today as Portland State University's 11th president. This week, our students returned to campus to kick off the 2023 academic year. And during this time, I've had the opportunity to interact with a lot of students. We are settling back into our campus in the heart of downtown Portland. I want to describe for you a little bit our student body. 80% of our students come from Oregon, and 47% of them are first-generation students. 40% of the students are Pell eligible, and we're very diverse in other ways as well. Half of our students are BIPOC. In fact, last year, our incoming undergraduate class, 58% of them identify as BIPOC. And of those, 23% identify as Latine, and so that makes us an emerging Hispanic institution. 70% of our graduates remain in Oregon, with 80% of those graduates actually staying in Portland or the metro region. So really, our students are the future of the state. I came to Portland State University because I'm excited about Portland, I'm excited about Oregon, and also because Portland State just prioritizes the values that made me want to get into university leadership in the first place. Educational opportunity, we're an access institution, we do community engaged research and teaching and learning. We provide social mobility for our students, and that is, we're known nationally for that. And of course, we have that great motto, let knowledge serve the city, which I really take to heart. I know that PSU does face challenges ahead. A lot of those challenges are challenges that most other universities are facing across the country. Declining enrollment, student mental health issues, strained resources. But when I look at Portland State, I really see tremendous opportunity. The Portland State University community is dedicated to its students. We are really student first here. That was clear to me the first time I visited campus. Our faculty and staff really work every day to prioritize our students. And this is evidence in the promise that we hold for our students at PSU to belong, believe, and become. All of our students belong at Portland State, and when we work to welcome them, when we work to be responsive to their needs, they will feel like they belong. And that's really the first and crucial step in their success. We empower them to believe in themselves and what they can achieve here. Our students come to us with incredible assets, but they often feel intimidated by the intellectual and social challenges of college. Our community works to help them to see that they can overcome those challenges. And eventually they do. They believe in themselves and they're able to see themselves as successful students, which is necessary for them to become what they dream of becoming, embracing their future careers and civic life with confidence and compassion. And I have heard so many wonderful stories of students who came with challenges, not really believing in themselves, and yet forging a great career and really adding to the civic life and the industry of Portland and of Oregon. So I'm looking forward to an opportunity to meeting each of you. I've met some of you, Representative Bowman, had a nice coffee with him in Tigard. Looking forward to other opportunities to meet each of you and learn more about your priorities for public higher education and how we can work together. So thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much and welcome. And
thank you.
From my standpoint, this is a kind of a perfect transition from where we were that last conversation to the conversation about higher education and the roles. And here's an example of one of the universities that plays a very different role than some of the others, and especially who it serves. So I think that's great. We welcome and we look forward to meeting you in person and having you before the committee. But thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
You bet. I'm going to close informational on the new president, and I'm going to open an informational on the topic that ought to be foremost in front of all of this committee on higher education, financial aid programs. So we finally get there to get to talk about this. So let's see, are we going to start with Heck? They're over here. Sorry, I have the wrong glasses on, I can't see. So I know that the director of Heck is on jury duty, so he's not able to join us. That seems like he could have told the judge, couldn't he, or somebody, that I have important things to do, but evidently not. Welcome. So let me just say for members of the committee, so this issue came up after the session closed, and it was one of the most of us weren't aware of the changes that were made in it. So part of this is just to understand what the changes are, and then to understand at this point the